I thought surrender meant losing control, losing myself, becoming less than I was. But I was wrong. In the silence of power, I discovered something deeper, belonging, trust, and a version of strength I never knew I had. If this story pulls you in, don't just listen. Like, subscribe, and join me for the next chapter where everything changes again. The door sealed shut with a sharp click that cracked through the silence like a gunshot. Cassandra didn't move at first. She let the quiet swell, dense and suffocating, until Sophia could almost feel the weight of her eyes burning into her back. They know Sophia. Her voice slipped into that dangerous velvet tone, low, controlled, carrying the promise of either reward or ruin. When she finally turned, her gaze was dark, steady, and absolute. A single manila envelope rested in her hand like a verdict already decided. The board has the photos. The rival executive has the leverage. She stepped closer, unhurried, inevitable. The scent of leather and vanilla wrapped around Sophia, tightening like a silent grip. A manicured nail traced the curve of her jaw, lifting her chin just enough to force eye contact. "And you," Cassandra murmured, "have the pen." The air between them thickened. "You can sign the confession and walk away untouched. Or you can sign everything over to me." Her lips curved faintly, not quite a smile. "But understand this, little secretary. If you choose me, there's no return. No light waiting at the end." Her voice dropped even further, intimate and final. "Are you ready to watch the world burn? Just to kneel with me in what's left?" The elevator opened with a soft hydraulic sigh, revealing the polished expanse of the 42nd floor. Vale Industries breathed cold air and ambition. Every surface gleamed, glass, marble, steel, reflecting power in its purest form. Sophia stepped out, her heels echoing too loudly in the vast stillness. Her reflection followed her in the dark glass of the conference room wall. Composed, professional, perfectly arranged. On the outside, she looked ready. Inside, tension coiled tight, pulling at every breath. This was the dream. Personal secretary to Cassandra Vale, the name alone carried weight. Sharp, untouchable, absolute. But with every step toward those towering double doors, it felt less like opportunity and more like surrender. Like walking toward something that would consume her whole. The office stretched across the corner of the building, wrapped in floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the skyline like a throne room view. When she knocked, the response came instantly. Enter, low, smooth. Without warmth, Cassandra stood by the window, her back turned, outlined against the gray morning light. When she faced her, the entire atmosphere shifted heavier, charged, as if the room itself recognized authority. Tall, imposing, dressed in a black suit that looked more like armor than fabric. Every line of her was deliberate, every detail controlled. Sophia, not a question, a statement she already knew. "You're 3 minutes early. Punctuality is expected, not impressive." Sophia's apology came steady. Despite the tightness in her chest, Cassandra moved closer, each step measured, predatory. The faint scent of vanilla lingered beneath something sharper, electric, like the air before a storm. "Your predecessor failed under pressure." Her fingers brushed a loose strand of hair near Sophia's temple, tucking it back with deliberate care. The touch was light, almost nothing, yet it sent a jolt straight through her. "I expect more from you." The words settled like a command etched into bone. The day unfolded in a blur. Files, corrections, precision layered on precision. Every task carried weight, every detail mattered. And always there was that presence behind the glass, watching. Not judging, not reacting, just observing. By late afternoon, the pressure had become physical. A tightening grip around her chest. And beneath it, something else stirred, something quieter, stranger. Relief in being told exactly what to do. Relief in not having to decide. At 5, the reports were placed carefully on Cassandra's desk. Without looking up, she spoke. "Leave them." Sophia hesitated, then asked softly if anything else was needed. Silence answered first. Then Cassandra's eyes lifted, locking onto hers with surgical precision. "The margin on page 4 is inconsistent. Do it again." The words landed clean, without emotion. Perfection wasn't optional. It was assumed. Night settled slowly, dimming the office into something more intimate. The harsh lights were gone, replaced by the warm glow of lamps that softened edges and deepened shadows. Alone, Sophia worked. Every sound felt louder. The hum of electronics, the rhythm of her breath, the faint pulse of the city far below. Time blurred as she chased something impossible to fully reach. Perfection kept shifting. It was nearly 9 when the door opened. She hadn't heard it. Cassandra moved like silence itself. The lock clicked again, sharp, final. Sophia stood instinctively, but the command came immediately. Sit. She obeyed. Cassandra leaned against the desk, flipping through the report with unhurried precision. Paper rustled softly in the quiet. When she reached page 4, she paused. Acceptable. The file slid across the desk, stopping just within reach. You have potential, she said, her voice quieter now. You follow direction well. Sophia's reply barely rose above a whisper. Cassandra stepped closer, close enough to take up all the space, to leave no room for anything else. Competence keeps you employed, she murmured. It doesn't keep you close. Her hand rested on the arm of the chair, caging Sophia in without force. The scent of vanilla deepened, mixing with the faint trace of night air. There are levels here, she continued, her gaze unwavering. Levels to this company, and levels to me. She leaned in just enough to make distance irrelevant. I see you, Sophia. The words sank deeper than anything else had. You crave structure. You want the weight of expectation. You want to be told, so you don't have to carry the burden yourself. Heat rose, unbidden, impossible to hide. The truth of it pressed in from all sides. Good. The moment snapped as quickly as it formed. Cassandra stepped back, the distance returning like a curtain falling. Go home. Tomorrow the real work begins. Her tone hardened again, precise and controlled. And remember, I don't require effort. A pause. I require devotion. She turned away, already done. The hallway felt colder. The elevator descent felt longer. The city outside blurred into streaks of light and shadow. Sophia stood there, heart still unsteady, thoughts unraveling faster than she could catch them. This was supposed to be a career, a step forward, a beginning. But somewhere between the commands, the silence, and the way Cassandra had looked at her, something had shifted. This wasn't just a job, it was a cage. And the most unsettling truth lingered long after the doors opened. She wasn't sure she wanted to escape. The lamplight skimmed across her eyes, catching the cold steel within them and softening it just enough to make it more dangerous, not less. I don't employ unsteady hands. Sophia swallowed, forcing her voice to hold. I'm sorry, Miss Vale. It's the storm. The storm is outside, Cassandra replied, lifting her glass with unhurried precision. You are in here. In here there is only what I permit. If you're shaking, it's not the weather, it's uncertainty. And uncertainty is a failure of control. The glass touched the table with a quiet, decisive click. Come here. Sophia stepped forward, stopping at the edge of the rug. Closer. Another step. Now she stood between Cassandra's knees, close enough to feel the faint warmth of her presence, to catch the layered scent of vanilla and rain still clinging to her coat. Cassandra looked up at her, expression unreadable, gaze steady and assessing. Turn around. The instruction came soft but absolute. A flicker of confusion crossed Sophia's face, but it vanished just as quickly. Face the window. She obeyed. The dark glass reflected her back at herself, small, tense, outlined by flashes of lightning tearing across the sky behind her. For a moment, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Then came the sound of movement, leather shifting, heels meeting the floor, slow, measured. Intentional. Sophia didn't turn. She waited, every sense sharpened, every nerve aware of the space closing behind her. Cassandra stopped just short of touching her. The absence of contact felt heavier than touch itself. Your posture is slipping, she murmured, her voice now at Sophia's ear, low enough to send a shiver down her spine. Sophia straightened instinctively, shoulders pulling back, chin lifting. You represent me at all times, Cassandra continued, especially when no one is watching. A breath caught in Sophia's chest as she adjusted, forcing herself into perfect alignment. Better. Then, finally, contact. Hands settled at her waist, firm, deliberate, grounding. Not gentle, not tentative. Certain. Sophia froze, breath hitching. This crossed every line she had drawn in her mind, and yet it felt like something that had been waiting to happen all along. You're holding tension, Cassandra said quietly. Something you need to release. I don't. Sophia's voice faltered. I don't know what you mean. You do. The hands shifted slightly, rising just enough to anchor her more completely. A subtle pull brought Sophia back, closing the last inch of space until her back met Cassandra's front. Unyielding. Present. You want direction, Cassandra murmured. You want the weight of decision taken from you. The rain battered the glass, masking the sound of Sophia's uneven breath. Say it. The reflection in the window showed everything. Cassandra behind her, taller, composed, completely in control of the space. Of her. Yes, Sophia whispered a pause. Yes, Miss Vale. A low hum of approval vibrated through the space between them. Good, the words settled deep, sending warmth through her in a way that had nothing to do with the room. Now breathe. Cassandra's voice slowed, steadying, in and out. Match me, Sophia tried, sinking herself to that rhythm. Breath by breath, the tension began to dissolve, not vanish, but shift, soften, transform into something heavier, quieter, something like surrender. Tomorrow, Cassandra said, her tone slipping back into that controlled velvet edge. You will sit behind me in the boardroom. You will observe. You will remain silent unless addressed directly. Her hands remained in place, a constant grounding presence. You will watch how control is maintained, and you will learn to master your own. Slowly, she turned Sophia to face her again, guiding rather than forcing. Up close, her gaze was sharper, more focused, tracing every reaction, every flicker of emotion. While we are here, she said, your time, your attention, your focus, everything belongs to this work. A brief pause. To me. The possessiveness in her voice was unmistakable. It should have unsettled her. Instead, something inside Sophia quieted. The uncertainty that had followed her all week, the constant questioning, the invisible pressure, it all narrowed into something defined. Something clear. I understand. Show me. The words landed softly, but carried weight. Sophia hesitated, caught between instinct and something deeper pulling at her. Then the hesitation broke slowly. She lowered herself. The carpet met her knees, soft and grounding. From this angle, the difference between them felt even more pronounced. Cassandra towering, composed, entirely in control. For a brief moment, nothing moved, then Cassandra exhaled, something almost like satisfaction flickering across her features. Perfect. A hand settled at the top of Sophia's head, fingers threading lightly into her hair. Not gentle, not cruel, claiming, "Stay." Sophia closed her eyes. The shame she expected never came. Instead, there was silence, clean, empty, peaceful. No noise, no doubt. Just the steady presence of Cassandra, the distant storm, and the absence of choice. For the first time, it felt like relief. After a moment, the hand lifted. The absence of it was immediate, almost cold. Stand. Sophia obeyed, her legs unsteady but responsive. Cassandra handed her the glass. Drink. The liquid burned its way down, warmth spreading outward, steadying her. Go to your room, Cassandra said, already turning back toward the window. Rest. Tomorrow begins early. A brief pause. The gray suit. Hair down. Sophia hesitated. I prefer it down. The words ended the thought before it could form. Yes, Miss Vale. She moved toward the connecting door, hand resting on the handle. Sophia. She turned. You did well tonight. Simple words. Quiet. But they landed with unexpected weight. Inside her room, the door closed, sealing her into a different kind of silence. Her heart still raced, but her thoughts had gone still. Her fingers brushed her hair, remembering. Then her waist. Then nothing at all. At the window, the storm still raged, wild and untamed. But inside, everything had shifted. She wasn't sure what this meant for her future, for her career, for herself. But lying there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, one truth settled in without resistance. Tomorrow, she wouldn't pull away. She would wear the gray suit, she would leave her hair down, and she would wait. The city blurred past in streaks of gold and red as the taxi cut through the night. Sophia rested her forehead against the glass, watching motion without seeing it. Her thoughts remained far above, anchored to that quiet, controlled space on the 42nd floor. A week had passed. A week of glances that lingered too long, of quiet instructions delivered without witnesses, of tension that never fully faded. Cassandra had kept her word. But tonight was different. The message had been simple. My office. 9 p.m. Come alone. No explanation. No context. The building rose ahead, a dark monolith against the night sky. Inside the revolving doors, her reflection stared back. Composed, polished, hiding the tremor she could still feel in her hands. The guard said nothing as she passed. The elevator carried her upward in silence, each floor tightening the coil in her chest. When the doors opened, the reception area was empty, dark waiting. The silence settled thick and unyielding, pressing against her ears until even the faintest sound felt amplified. Sophia crossed the marble floor, each step measured, her heels tapping softly, echoing like a second heartbeat in the empty space. Cassandra's office door stood slightly open, a thin line of warm light spilling across the darkened carpet. Sophia knocked once. Enter. The voice that answered was different, lower, stripped of its usual sharp professionalism, carrying something quieter, more deliberate. She pushed the door open. The room felt altered. The desk was bare. No files, no devices, no signs of the relentless work that usually defined it. just space, just stillness. And Cassandra, she stood near the desk, dressed not in her usual structured precision but in something softer. A silk's blouse, the top button undone. A glass of wine rested in her hand, untouched, as if it existed only as a prop in the silence. She wasn't working, she was waiting. "Lock the door behind you, Sophia." The words were calm, but they carried weight. Sophia turned, fingers briefly unsteady as she slid the lock into place. The click echoed, sealing the room, closing off everything beyond it. When she faced her again, Cassandra had moved. Now she stood at the center of the room, near the leather chair, grounded, composed. "Come here." Sophia approached, stopping just within reach. Cassandra set the glass aside. "You've done well this week," she said, her voice measured. Precise, obedient, a step closer. "But that version of you, the one who exists in meetings and reports, that's a performance." Her gaze sharpened. "I've already seen what's underneath." Sophia's breath caught slightly. "Miss Vale, I don't." "The mask," Cassandra interrupted softly. "The competent assistant, the careful distance, another step. Tonight, that's not what I want." The space between them disappeared. "Tonight, you stop performing." The words didn't rise in volume, but they deepened, settling into something that felt more intimate than command. Sophia stood still, caught between instinct and something harder to name. "I need you to understand the difference," Cassandra continued. "This is not about roles, not about titles." A pause. "It's about trust." She held Sophia's gaze, steady, unflinching. "I don't take control without consent. I don't push without knowing where your limits are. And I don't leave you there alone." The room felt quieter somehow, as if even the air had stilled to listen. "If something becomes too much, you speak. If you need space, you take it. Nothing happens here without that understanding." Sophia nodded slowly, the tension in her chest shifting, not gone, but reshaped into something steadier. "Good." Cassandra's expression softened just a fraction. "Then stay." The word carried no force, no pressure, only invitation layered with expectation. And Sophia did. The office no longer felt like a place of work. The edges had blurred, the sharp lines softened into something quieter, more enclosed. Time seemed to stretch, each second deliberate. Cassandra guided the pace. Not through force, but through presence. Through the way she moved, the way she spoke, the way she watched. Every instruction was measured, every response observed. And slowly, the tension that had lived in Sophia for days began to unravel. Not all at once, but piece by piece. By the time it ended, the silence that returned felt different. Not heavy, not suffocating. Calm Sophia sat wrapped in that quiet, her breathing steady again, her thoughts no longer racing. The storm that had followed her all week had settled into something distant, manageable. Cassandra remained nearby, not imposing, not distant, just present. "You did well," she said quietly, syllable words, but they landed deeper than anything else. Sophia nodded, pulling herself back together, aware now of the shift that had taken place. Not just in the room, but inside her. Nothing looked different. The office was the same. The city lights still flickered beyond the glass. But something had changed, something that wouldn't easily return to what it had been before. They left together. The building was nearly empty, the night stretching wide and quiet around them. In the elevator, Cassandra's hand brushed against hers, brief, deliberate, not commanding, not distant. Just there, the car ride passed in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Words weren't needed. The understanding between them had already been spoken in other ways. When they reached Sophia's building, Cassandra walked her to the door. "Monday," she said simply. Sophia nodded. "I'll be there." A brief pause, then Cassandra leaned in, her presence close but controlled, her voice softer than before. "Rest." It wasn't a command. It felt like something else entirely. Sophia watched her leave, the car disappearing into the night before she stepped inside. The apartment felt unchanged, but she didn't. Standing in front of the mirror, she searched for something visible, some sign of the shift she could feel so clearly. There was none. And yet everything was different. She had stepped across a line, one that couldn't be undone. Lying in bed, staring into the dark, she expected unease, doubt, regret. None came. Only a quiet awareness, a realization that what she had given hadn't been taken. It had been offered, and in return, she had been given something she hadn't known she needed: clarity. Outside, the storm had passed. Inside, something new had begun. The black skirt sat higher on her thighs than anything she would normally wear to the office. She had bought it quietly, almost impulsively, after catching the subtle shift in Cassandra's gaze the first time the idea had been suggested. Beneath the long coat, it felt like a secret, dangerous, deliberate, impossible to ignore. By 5, the office had emptied, voices faded, doors closed. The cleaning crew drifted through the halls like shadows barely present. Sophia waited until the last trace of movement disappeared before locking the main entrance and making her way to the private elevator reserved for the upper floor. The ascent was smooth, soundless. When the doors opened, the space beyond was dim, reshaped by carefully placed light. The harsh brightness of the day was gone, replaced by low lamps that stretched shadows across the marble and glass. Cassandra stood at the center of it all. She had changed. The rigid jacket was gone, replaced by a dark vest over a white shirt, sleeves rolled just enough to reveal strength beneath precision. She looked less like an executive now, more like something that commanded without needing a title. Coat. No greeting, no softness, just instruction. Sophia let it fall from her shoulders, the fabric pooling at her feet. The air felt cooler against her skin, sharper. She stood in the skirt and silk blouse, fully dressed yet suddenly aware of every inch of herself. Cassandra's gaze moved over her slowly, deliberately, taking in every detail. She circled her once, heels clicking in a steady rhythm. Sophia kept her eyes fixed ahead, just as she had been taught. Look at me. The command came from behind. Sophia turned her head. Your entire body. The correction was immediate, precise. She adjusted quickly, turning fully to face her. Total attention, Cassandra said, stepping into her space. When I speak, there is nothing else. Not the room, not the world, not even your own thoughts. A fingertip traced lightly along Sophia's jaw, guiding her focus back where it belonged. You're distracted, she continued, quieter now. And I need you present. The words settled firmly. You are not here as an employee tonight. A pause. You are here because you chose to be. That distinction lingered, grounding everything that followed. Cassandra moved to the desk, picking up a slender black instrument, tapping it lightly against her palm. The sound echoed, measured, controlled, marking time. Come. Sophia stepped onto the rug at the center of the room, stopping where indicated. Kneel. She lowered herself without hesitation, the soft fibers pressing beneath her knees. From this angle, Cassandra seemed even more imposing. Framed by shadow and light, the tip of the object lifted her chin slightly, guiding her gaze upward. There's strength in discipline, Cassandra said quietly, and attention is part of that discipline. Her voice never rose, yet it carried complete authority. Stand. Sophia obeyed. Turn. Another command followed without pause. The sequence that followed was controlled, deliberate, not rushed, not chaotic. Every movement, every instruction carried intention. It wasn't about punishment. It wasn't about loss of control. It was about structure, about focus, about being brought entirely into the present moment, where nothing else existed except breath, sensation, and awareness. When it ended, the shift was immediate. The intensity dissolved into something steadier. Cassandra's hands found her again, this time grounding rather than directing, pulling her close. The contrast was sharp enough to leave Sophia momentarily unbalanced, her breath uneven as she leaned into the contact. You held yourself well, Cassandra murmured, her voice softer now, almost reassuring. Remember that. Sophia exhaled slowly, the tension easing from her body as she let herself settle. I'm here, she whispered, more to herself than anything else. Cassandra pulled back just enough to look at her, studying her face, confirming what words couldn't fully express. Good. The space beyond the office was quieter, more private. A place few ever saw. The lighting there was softer still, the atmosphere intentionally removed from the sharp edges of the corporate world outside. Sophia sat where she was guided, every movement slower now, the earlier intensity replaced by a quiet awareness. Nothing was rushed, nothing forced, every moment carried intention, shaped by mutual understanding rather than assumption. Time blurred again, though differently this time. Less sharp, more fluid. When it was over, the city beyond the windows had dimmed, night deepening into something softer. Sophia lay still, her breathing steady, the earlier tension replaced by a calm she hadn't expected. Cassandra remained beside her, close but not overwhelming, her presence steady, grounding. Rest. The word came quietly, almost instinctively. Sophia closed her eyes. For once, her thoughts didn't spiral, they didn't race. They simply settled. Morning came quietly. The room was empty when she woke, the space returned to stillness. Everything was in place, composed, as if nothing had shifted. Except her. A note rested nearby, simple, direct, a reminder of the world waiting outside. She dressed, composed herself, and stepped back into the rhythm of the city. People moved around her unaware, caught in their own routines. They saw what they expected to see: professional, controlled, ordinary. But beneath it, something had changed. At her desk, everything resumed as it always did. Calls, emails, schedules. Cassandra didn't acknowledge her at first, her voice sharp and efficient as she handled business without pause. And yet, a message appeared. Brief. Precise. A quiet echo of the night before. Sophia deleted it instantly, but the warmth remained. She glanced up. Cassandra's gaze met hers for only a fraction of a second before returning to work. Nothing visible had changed, but everything had. Days passed. The pattern settled again. Structured, controlled, divided between what the world could see and what it couldn't. But something new threaded through it now. A shift in the air, subtle. Persistent. Not the familiar awareness of Cassandra's presence. Something else. Something watching. Small details began to slip out of place. Doors left slightly open, timing just off enough to notice. Movements that didn't belong. And then there was Julian, always polite, always smiling, but never warm. And for the first time, the tension Sophia felt had nothing to do with control. It felt like being observed, not claimed, hunted. The black skirt felt different the moment she put it on. Shorter than anything she had ever worn to work, sharper, almost deliberate in a way she didn't fully admit to herself. It had been bought quietly, after a suggestion that lingered in Cassandra's tone one evening, half instruction, half curiosity. Under the long coat, it felt less like clothing and more like intention, hidden, controlled, loaded with meaning only she understood. By the time the clock hit 5, the office had emptied out completely, the last footsteps faded. The cleaning crew moved through distant corridors like fading echoes of the day. Sophia waited until even their presence dissolved before locking the main doors and heading toward the private elevator that led directly to the upper suite. The ascent was silent. When the doors opened, the atmosphere changed immediately. Light was different here. Softer, lower, intentional. The harsh white glare of corporate hours had been replaced with dim, atmospheric lamps that stretched shadows across polished surfaces like long thoughts that refused to end. Cassandra was already there waiting, not seated, not working, just present. Her appearance had shifted as well. No rigid blazer, no corporate armor. A dark vest over a white shirt, sleeves rolled with effortless control. She looked less like an executive and more like a force that didn't need permission to exist. Coat. No greeting. No warmth. Only instruction. Sophia obeyed, letting the coat slip from her shoulders and fall to the floor without hesitation. The air felt colder immediately, more exposed. She stood in the black skirt and silk blouse, aware of every detail of herself in a way that had nothing to do with clothing anymore. Cassandra's gaze moved over her slowly, measured, deliberate, like she was reading something only she could see. She began to circle. The sound of her heels marked each step, steady, controlled, impossible to ignore. Sophia kept her eyes forward, exactly as she had been trained. "Look at me." The command came from behind her. Her head turned slightly. The correction was immediate. "Your body follows when I speak." The tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I'm sorry," Sophia said quickly, voice tightening. "Sorry is for accidents," Cassandra replied. This was choice. She stepped into view, close enough now that attention became unavoidable. "You know the rule," Cassandra said. "Total presence. When I am here, nothing else exists. Not the building, not the city, not your thoughts." A pause. "Only me." "I understand," Sophia whispered. "No," Cassandra said softly. "You don't, not yet." A hand lifted, not forceful, not abrupt, fingertips tracing the line of Sophia's jaw as if correcting alignment rather than touching skin. "You're elsewhere," she continued. "I need you here." The words settled deeper than they should have. "Tonight, you are not here as staff." A pause that held weight. "You are here under me." Sophia's breath caught, but she didn't step back. Cassandra moved to the desk and picked something up. A slender crop, black leather, silver tip catching the low light. She didn't strike it. She simply tapped it against her palm, each sound precise, controlled, almost rhythmic. The room seemed to narrow with each sound. "Come to the rug." Sophia moved. The Persian rug softened her steps as she crossed the room and lowered herself where indicated. The fabric pressed into her knees. From here, Cassandra looked even more distant, even more certain. The crop lifted her chin slightly. "You're most honest when you stop resisting," Cassandra said quietly. "But honesty requires discipline." Sophia's pulse tightened. Cassandra's voice shifted slightly. "Wednesday's briefing," she said. You looked away twice. A pause. At Julian Moretti. Sophia's throat tightened. I was taking notes. You looked at him. The correction was final, and I do not tolerate divided attention where I am concerned. Silence followed, then the instruction came. Stand. Turn. Hands on the desk. Sophia obeyed. The air felt heavier now, charged with expectation rather than fear. She leaned forward onto the desk, palm steadying herself against the cool surface. The sound came before the sensation. Air shifting, controlled movement cutting through stillness, then impact. Sharp, focused. Precise. A breath left her before she could stop it. That is for distraction, Cassandra said evenly. A pause, silence stretched deliberately, then another, for forgetting what belongs where. The second followed with equal control. Each moment between strikes carried more weight than the strike itself. Not chaos, not loss of control. Prevention, present sharpened down to a single point. Count, Cassandra ordered. 1, Sophia whispered. Another pause, another breath. 2. Her voice steadied. The pattern continued until trembling replaced stillness, until thought itself narrowed into sensation, into awareness, into nothing beyond the moment. Then it stopped. Silence returned, but it wasn't empty anymore. Cassandra stepped behind her and turned her carefully, guiding her upright. The intensity shifted instantly, like a switch had been turned off. Hands settled around her, not restraining, not punishing. Ensuring, the transition left Sophia disoriented for a moment, breath uneven, body still carrying echoes of tension. You're here, Cassandra said quietly. It wasn't a question. Sophia nodded faintly. Cassandra pulled her closer. The shift in her was immediate, no longer sharp, no longer procedural. Something steadier took its place, protective, controlled, unwavering. You are not weakened by this, Cassandra said. You are focused by it. Sophia exhaled slowly, letting herself settle into the contact. Cassandra guided her to the adjoining private space beyond the office. Softer lighting, quieter atmosphere, removed from everything outside. No urgency followed, only care and motion. She sat her down, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, handed her water. Slow, Cassandra said simply. Sophia obeyed. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was stable. After a while, Cassandra sat beside her. Not too close, not distant. Just enough to remain present. Whatever happens outside this room, she said quietly, does not touch what exists here without permission. Sophia nodded. A pause lingered, then Cassandra added, voice lower now, more serious than before. This stays between us. It wasn't a command, it was a boundary. Morning arrived without announcement. Sophia woke to quiet. The room was reset, composed, as if the night had been folded away carefully and stored out of sight. The space beside her was empty but not cold. A note waited nearby, clear, direct, uncomplicated. She dressed in silence, stepped back into the city before most people had even started their day. The world outside moved normally, unaware, unchanged. At her desk, everything resumed its rhythm. But the message came later. A single glance toward the glass office confirmed what she already felt. She was being watched, and for reasons she couldn't fully explain anymore. That knowledge no longer unsettled her the way it should have. Then came Julian. At first, it was subtle, questions that lingered too long. Presence that didn't leave quickly. Conversations that shifted tone when Cassandra wasn't near. Then pressure, then intent, then something sharper. What began as curiosity turned into something else entirely. Measured, calculating, invasive in a way that no longer pretended to be polite. And for the first time, Sophia understood that not all attention was the same. Some watched to understand, some watched to take, and some watched to break what they couldn't control. The black skirt felt unfamiliar against her skin, shorter than anything she normally wore into the office. It was hidden beneath a long coat for most of the day, a secret she carried through meetings and corridors, as though it were something far more dangerous than fabric. By the time the clock neared closing hours, the building had begun to empty, the hum of activity thinning into silence. Cleaning staff moved through distant hallways, their presence fading like echoes, until only the structure itself seemed to remain awake. She waited until the last footsteps disappeared before securing the main door and moving toward the private elevator reserved for the executive floor. The ascent was smooth and soundless, each passing second pulling her further away from the ordinary world below. When the doors parted, the atmosphere shifted immediately. The lighting had been altered again. No harsh overhead glare, only soft lamps casting long, deliberate shadows that made the space feel quieter, heavier, more intentional. Cassandra was already there, waiting at the center of the room. The formality of her daytime presence had been stripped away. Her jacket was gone, sleeves rolled, her posture no longer just corporate authority but something more unguarded and controlled in a different way. Her gaze settled on Sophia at once, precise and unyielding. No greeting came. Only a single instruction, calm and absolute, breaking the silence. The coat was gone from Sophia's shoulders before hesitation could form, slipping to the floor without ceremony. What remained felt more exposed than anything she had worn before, even though nothing was technically revealed. The weight of Cassandra's attention moved over her slowly, assessing, claiming space without touch. Cassandra circled her once, heels marking soft, deliberate beats against marble. Sophia kept her gaze fixed forward, anchoring herself to the discipline she had been taught, resisting the instinct to follow every movement. When the command came to look at her, it cut through the air sharply, and even the small act of turning felt subject to correction. Her posture became the next point of focus. A reminder followed, precise and unyielding, about attention, about presence, about the necessity of existing fully in the moment when she was here. The outside world was dismissed entirely. No building, no city, no noise beyond this room. Only awareness remained, narrowed to a single point. Cassandra closed the distance, her voice lower now, stripped of professional polish. Her hand lifted, tracing the line of Sophia's jaw with controlled familiarity, as if confirming a truth already known. The distinction was made clear without softness. This was no longer about employment or duty in the ordinary sense. It was about belonging, about focus, about surrendering distraction until only clarity remained. The crop appeared in her hand next, its presence changing the atmosphere instantly. It was not used immediately. It was held, rotated, tapped lightly against her palm, each sound measured, deliberate, building a rhythm that replaced thought with anticipation. The instruction to move followed, and Sophia obeyed without resistance, lowering herself onto the rug where indicated. The silence that followed carried weight. The first strike broke it cleanly, sharp enough to erase everything except sensation and breath. There was no chaos in it, only structure, punctuated moments that demanded presence, counting, awareness, grounding her entirely in the present moment. Each pause between actions stretched time, forcing stillness, forcing focus. When it ended, the absence of sound felt almost heavier than the actions themselves. Cassandra set the instrument aside and closed the distance between them, hands replacing tension with steadiness. The shift was immediate and deliberate, pulling Sophia back from intensity into something quieter, held and contained. Her arms wrapped around Sophia with firm certainty, not removing what had happened but transforming its meaning. The voice that followed was softer now, steady and grounding, reminding rather than commanding. What had taken place was framed not as harm, but as instruction, as clarity, as reinforcement of trust. The words settled slowly, dissolving the sharp edges left behind. Sophia remained still, breathing unevenly at first, then gradually finding rhythm again as the storm inside her eased. The world outside the office felt distant, irrelevant. What remained was presence, contact, grounding. The space beyond the office door no longer existed in her awareness. Only this room, this silence, this connection remained. When she was guided further into the private suite, the lighting shifted again, softer still, designed to erase the edges of the world. The atmosphere was no longer corporate or formal. It had become enclosed, insulated from everything outside. A collar lay waiting on the nightstand, simple in design, carrying meaning that did not need explanation spoken aloud. It was accepted without hesitation. The moment it settled, it became less an object, and more a sensation of continuity, a reminder of structure, of attention, of where focus belonged in this space. Cassandra's hand lingered briefly against it, confirming fit, checking response, ensuring awareness rather than discomfort. There was no rush in what followed. Every movement was deliberate, unhurried, as if time itself had been set aside. The world outside ceased to matter entirely. The boundaries of roles, hierarchy, and identity blurred into something quieter and more intimate, defined not by titles but by trust and control shared in equal measure. Later, when stillness returned, they lay in the dim glow of the city filtering through distant glass. The weight of the night was no longer sharp. It had softened into something sustained, something held. Cassandra remained close, an anchor in the dark, her presence steady enough to replace thought with calm. Sleep came unevenly. But peace did not require it to be complete. Morning arrived without ceremony. The collar was gone, placed neatly aside, as though it had never carried the weight of the night. A message waited in its place, brief and precise, returning the world to order, work, routine, control. The day resumed as if nothing had changed. Sophia walked back into the city with steady steps, her expression composed, her presence indistinguishable from everyone around her. But something remained beneath the surface, unseen but unshaken. A private understanding that no one else could perceive. To the world, she was ordinary. Within her, nothing was. The city below continued its endless motion, unaware of what had shifted far above it. From the height of the glass tower, everything looked distant, reduced to lights and movement that no longer carried weight. Inside, however, there was stillness, a kind of quiet certainty that had settled into her bones and no longer felt fragile. She had thought once that surrender meant disappearance, that giving control to someone else meant being diminished. But that belief no longer held. What she had discovered instead was something far more precise. An alignment, a place where pressure no longer scattered her, where chaos no longer pulled her apart. Cassandra sat at her desk, signing documents with calm efficiency, each stroke of her pen controlled and deliberate. When her gaze lifted and found Sophia watching her, there was no interruption in her focus, only recognition. The question came without tension, simple and grounded in presence. Sophia answered just as quietly, the words carrying more weight than they first appeared to hold. Gratitude followed, not for possession, not for control, but for the freedom that had been found within choice itself. Cassandra set the pen down and held her gaze across the space between them, as if measuring the truth of what had been said. Her voice softened, but not in uncertainty. It was certainty refined into clarity. Nothing that had meaning here was ever forced. It only existed because it was chosen. Kneeling, serving, trusting. All of it held value only because it was freely given. Without choice, it would be empty. With choice, it became something else entirely. Sophia understood, not as instruction, but as realization. What existed between them was not confinement. It was agreement, not chains, but intention. What had once been interpreted as loss of control had revealed itself as a different kind of strength. The strength to decide where she belonged and remain there without fear. The phone interrupted the moment, pulling the world back into motion. Cassandra answered with the familiar precision of her public self, the version of her that commanded boardrooms and corporations without hesitation. The private atmosphere shifted, not breaking but compartmentalizing. Work resumed because it always did. That was its nature. The company still existed, still demanded structure, still required leadership. Cassandra turned back toward it without hesitation, and Sophia followed the instruction as naturally as breathing. The storm that had once defined everything was no longer present. In its place was clarity, a sky that had been torn apart and now held steady again. Julian was gone, not with spectacle or collapse, but with administrative finality. His presence removed, his influence erased, as though the system itself had corrected an imbalance. There was no celebration in it, only resolution. Sophia remained at her desk as night settled over the city. The glow of the monitor illuminated her hands, steady now, no longer marked by uncertainty. The silence around her was no longer oppressive. It had changed form entirely. It had become space rather than absence. She should have left hours ago. She did not move. Cassandra remained behind glass, visible only in silhouette, working through the final threads of the day. There was no separation felt between them anymore, not in the way there had once been. The boundary still existed physically, but it no longer divided meaning. It framed it. When the intercom finally broke the silence, it did so cleanly, without hesitation. The instruction was simple. Entry. Lock the door. Nothing more was needed. Sophia obeyed, crossing the familiar distance into the office where the atmosphere shifted again. The blinds were drawn, the outside world removed. Only the two of them remained within the enclosed space they had learned to build. Cassandra spoke first, acknowledging what had been done during the day, not as praise alone, but as recognition of judgment, action, and alignment. What had occurred was not simply obedience. It was participation, a conscious step into responsibility that extended beyond role or expectation. The distinction mattered. Sophia had not merely followed. She had acted. Cassandra closed the distance between them, her presence steady, grounded, unshaken. What she described was not domination in its simplest interpretation, but structure built on trust, a system that only held because both sides chose to remain within it. When she reached for Sophia's hand, there was no hesitation, no resistance, only acceptance. Fingers interlaced, not as possession, but as confirmation. For the first time, there was no separation between command and understanding. No need for performance, no need for withdrawal or concealment. Only presence remained. The confession came unexpectedly, but not uncontrollably. It did not break the moment, it completed it. And instead of distance, it was met with closeness. Steady, grounded, unafraid of what had been spoken. What followed was not urgency, not chaos, but continuity. Something that had already been forming beneath everything they had built. Not escape from reality, but integration within it. Later, when silence returned, it did not feel empty. It felt full. The kind of fullness that does not demand attention, only awareness. The conversation that followed was quieter. Not about ownership in its literal sense, but about life continuing beyond the walls of the office. About protection, about boundaries, about the reality of existing in a world that would not understand what had been built between them. And still, it remained. When they finally left together, there was no secrecy in their movement, no need for it. They walked through the corridor side by side as if the structure of the building itself had adjusted to accommodate them. No one stopped them. No one questioned what they saw. The world, as always, interpreted only what it was prepared to understand. Outside, the night air was cooler, sharper, more ordinary than what had been left behind upstairs. Cassandra released her hand only when necessary, and even then it felt temporary rather than final. A final instruction was given before separation. Simple, direct, routine returning to its place. It was not an ending, it was continuation under structure. The elevator doors closed between them, but nothing truly separated. Sophia sat in the back of the taxi alone, the city passing in blurred streaks of light. Her hand lifted without thought, resting against the small silver key at her throat. Its presence was subtle but constant, not a restraint, not a declaration. A reminder the person she had been before still existed somewhere behind her, but she no longer felt split from that version. Everything had carried forward. Nothing had been erased. Understanding came slowly. Without ceremony, control had never been the point. Belonging had been. Not to a system, not to a role, but to a place where she no longer had to fracture herself to survive. When she arrived home, the apartment no longer felt empty. It simply felt quiet. She looked at herself in the mirror and did not see contradiction. Secretary, partner, submissive, none of it conflicted anymore because none of it stood alone. What remained was coherence. Sleep came easily that night, without tension, without falling, without fear. Only stillness, only flight, and somewhere far above the sleeping city, the glass tower continued to stand, unchanged, as though nothing extraordinary had ever happened within it at all. But everything had.